Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Healing Visionaries online show. Today we have with us Dr. Mattie Davis-Wolfe and Dr. David Thomson. Welcome to both of you. I'll just give a brief introduction for each of you. Mattie, for over 4 years, as an author, retired educator, registered nurse, and counselor, Dr. Mattie Davis-Wolfe has ceremonially participated in the company of Indigenous elders and leaders from around the world. Her teachings focus on the sacredness of life through spirit in action gatherings. Using insights, traditional teachings, practical shamanism, and experiential exercises, she addresses 4 levels of being: spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical, and teaches students how to cleanse, heal, and integrate these 4 bodies for greater awareness, balance, wholeness, and planetary regeneration. Mattie's ability springs from a mixture largely unfamiliar in modern life: a rich women's heritage, broad experiences of shamanic apprenticeship and initiation, and a deep and tested faith in the sacredness of all life's relationships. With her husband, Dr. David Thomson, Mattie founded Sacred Circles Institute, which offers workshops, retreats, and a 2-year self-paced course in personal and spiritual development entitled Walking the Sacred Wheel. Welcome, Mattie. Thank you for your time and coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. David Thomson is a co-founder and co-director with his wife, Dr. Mattie Davis-Wolfe, of Sacred Circles Institute. David is a retired professor of human relations and college counselor. He and Mattie have spent considerable time over the last 30 years with Indigenous elders and ceremonial leaders from the US, Canada, Mexico, Peru, and Siberia. They teach a multicultural, earth-honoring path where all nations and people are welcome under the sacred tree of life. Welcome, David. It's great, and Mattie, for both of you to be here and taking the time to be on the show.
We're happy to be here.
And what amazing background and work you've done with Indigenous people all over the world. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. I know also, David, you danced in the Sundance several times.
22 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So far. I'm still dancing.
Wow. How did all of this come into your life? What were, at what point did you get on the path?
Well, I first started out as a nurse working with Native tribes. And of course, I thought I was going there to teach them about well baby care and health issues. And what I realized that spirit tricked me into going there in order to learn from them. And so that just became a experience of learning to be in their world rather than in the modern Western worldview, and how those 2 worldviews are different in how they approach life. So part of that worldview is that you allow spirit, nature, Mother Earth to bring the future to you and you recognize it. And in doing that, then you know that you're walking on the path of your personal destiny, the thing that you agreed to do before you came to this planet. And so that's what it's been. It's been synchronicities and people showing up and people coming. For instance, working with the Siberian shaman came from, after the fall of the Communist Party, the Siberian shaman, the Siberian people were put on reservations in Russia, just like we had put our native indigenous people. Wow. And when the Communist Party went away, so did their stipends. Well, their salmon had mercury poisoning, and their reindeer were irradiated from Chernobyl. So they could not live off the land anymore. And their children were taken away and sent to the city and put in school, taken away from their tribal families. And one man who was a university professor learned that his people were really suffering. He'd never been back to his tribe, but he made the journey back to the Amur River Valley and realized that they were going to starve if he didn't help in some way. And so he said, what you do have is your culture, and that you can share. And so then word of mouth, and David at that time was a director of a lifelong learning institute, and someone called us and said, would you sponsor these people to come from Siberia, or they are going to perish. And so we did, and that's how then we met up with those shamans. Over many years, we brought them from Russia, from the Indian Valley, to Seattle, and they shared their teachings and their culture, etc. So that's, one way. Usually it's someone calling, like someone calling you and telling you about us, etc. And that's how it's happened.
Wow. Wow. Are they still there in the area, or what happened now in their life?
No, they're still there. They have a cultural center now in which people come in and they share their traditional crafts and their dance, etc. They were a 5,000-year-old uninterrupted matrilineal tribe. So you can imagine I jumped at the chance to be able to experience them. And the first shaman that we brought over was Grandmother Mingo. Grandmother Mingo was in her 90s. She had never been away from her tribal lands, and she came to the U.S. and she had never ridden in a car before either, and she got really car sick. And one day I said to her through interpreters, because she didn't even speak Russian. We had to have an Ulchi interpreter and a Russian interpreter. And I said, Grandmother, what made you do this? It's such an arduous journey for your age. And she said, we make a pilgrimage to the sea and make offerings to the salmon to call them back. And she said, I was a little girl and I was standing with my grandfather, and she said, I looked out into the sea and I made a promise. And I said to my grandfather, what is on the other side of the sea? And he said, another land. And she said she made a promise in that moment as a little girl that one day she would travel to this other land and make an offering to the sea. And so when she heard about this opportunity, I just got chills. I just got spirit chills. When she heard about this opportunity to come to this land that was across the sea, then even at her advanced age, she made the trek. And she had a dream. She had this dream that she flew on this silver bird. And when she landed, the bird landed on the land, she got into this great big black box. And the box had wheels, and it took her. And so when we heard about this dream, we rented a limousine, a black limousine, to pick her up so that she could ride in this black box.
Oh, that's so perfect.
It was absolutely perfect. And we took her to the sea. Seattle, is not actually on the coast, it's on the Sound, where the drive to the seacoast. It took a couple of hours, and we'd have to stop every 15 or 20 minutes because she'd get car sick. And we finally made it to the sea so that she could make offerings to the other side of the sea. So,
wow.
Cross my heart story.
That's an incredibly vivid visual she had as a young girl, the silver bird and everything. Yeah. And so backing up into your early lives, what specifically, is there any time or any remarkable starting point that happened?
I was raised a Catholic, and I was a deeply devoted person to my faith and to my spirituality. And as I grew older and into my early 20s, I realized that, honestly, that an external authority, a God, He, outside of myself, mediated by a priest, did not feel true inside of me. And so I set on a journey to figure out what was from the inside of me felt true. And in earth honoring spirituality, it's non-mediated. It's an experience of you personally, speaking with spirit, speaking with God, speaking with whatever name you need to call that, and then getting direct revelation, direct experience, direct knowing, inner knowing. And I found that in the earth honoring, earth-based native practices.
Right. Me too. It's wonderful when you can be taken into the earth-based cultures and learn another way of being.
You know, tell you.
Well, mine started years ago when I was a little boy. I felt like I was always looking for Jesus. And when I was 3, my mother, I was going to Sunday school at a Presbyterian church. And she said, I remember the feeling, but she said that I told her, I said, I don't want to go to this church anymore because all I do is play in the sandbox and color, and I want to find Jesus. So we lived in a small community in Oregon, and so she took me to the only other church, which was a Christian Science church, which I attended until I was 12. And I learned a lot about Jesus in a spiritual way, and learned how to heal even as a young boy, to work with the energies they were working with. But as I grew older at 11 or 12, I started asking questions like, why don't you baptize like Jesus was baptized in the Jordan? Why don't you marry? And they were putting me off and saying, oh, well, we don't know, they couldn't answer the question. So I basically concluded, Cailin, that what I was looking for wasn't on the earth anymore. And the rest of the story is a long story. Part of it, I'll skip 20 years because I was wandering, trying to make sense of everything. Excuse me. And as I told you last time we talked, I was very confused. I went to this old Englishman when I was in my 40s and told him my story about trying to find what I was looking for. And that's when he said to me, oh, lad, you're just a wee bit fey. Like your father's family from Scotland, you're just a wee bit fey. And I went, gay, what? Because I had never heard that word before. And then he explained to me about the fairy folk in Scotland and Ireland. And it was like putting a key in a lock and then opening the door to say that I have always been walking between the worlds. And not long after that, then I heard the word shaman, she-man, man-she for the first time. Because I've always had a very well-developed feminine. I was always drawing and arranging flowers and decorating when I was a little boy, which horrified my father because I'm sure he thought it was either gay or going to be gay or something. And so he proceeded to make sure that I was indoctrinated into football and basketball and fishing and so forth. But when I heard that word, I felt it was like another key in the lock being turned. And it opened up the world so that I began to be comfortable with who I was. And it wasn't long after that, because I was saying, where are my teachers? That my teachers, the indigenous teachers, started showing up in my late 40s. And so for the last 30 years, they keep showing up. And as Mattie said, when the Siberian showed up, my Blackfoot teacher showed up, and others from Peru and other places just kept showing up in my life and in our lives. We came together about 31 years ago. So that's the brief story.
Yeah, I can imagine it must be an epic story. And just hearing that snippet, it's so valuable, you know, how that happens. And when is that, when the two of you met, or how did you come to know each other?
Yeah, we met in an experiential setting where a man was offering the experience of facing your greatest fears. And David was part of, he was part of that organization, and they created a ropes course so that you could climb these really high, tall trees and and do what beyond what you thought you could do, experience yourself as a greater self, etc. And so we met there and
in Taos,
New Mexico, and the rest was history. And began a journey of being able to live our life in a worldview that's fundamentally different than the modern Western worldview. And that is the worldview of the sacredness of relationships. So for instance, story is a huge part of indigenous around the world people, because it's a huge part of their life, and they make no distinction, as you know, between secular life and sacred life. It's all one life to them. And story to them is part of how humans keep our end of the bargain. We keep remembering and telling the stories, and those stories feed back to the earth the energy that it needs to feed then to us. It's a reciprocal relationship of us recognizing that we have a responsibility, an ability to respond to the earth and its needs, rather than thinking of the earth as an inert thing that we just receive from, that they have the knowing that we must also give back to the earth. So they will say, for instance, that humans were actually supposed to remember to sing the sun up, but we forgot along the way. So bird people had to come and do that for us until we can remember that it's part of our sacred responsibility to sing the sun up each morning, or it won't rise. It needs to be called forth and invited.
Wow. I love all the stories from the native traditions helping explain the universe. They're
Right.
so beautiful. Yeah.
And so often as quantum science continues to grow, they say the same thing. They say, oh my gosh, we discovered that, the vibrations, are the same. And, it's for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, humans knew the truth. And we're just now catching up in the modern Western world.
Right. I love that. I think so many people are starting to see that the ancient wisdom is far more advanced than we are even close to it.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some of the challenges that you both faced, walking this spiritual path?
Besides being married together for 31 years.
Yeah.
So we often say that our relationship is our biggest challenge because we're both very strong people. And so we've been refining each other for the past 30 years. So every day is an experience, I think, Cailin, that the biggest challenge is to keep coming back to source in spite of all the distractions and the forces that want to pull us back. And so that's one of the reasons we've chosen to live in the woods. Outside, we live in a forest with a salmon state. And part of the reason we do that is so that we are connected every day. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is because it's so easy to get trapped in television, our own minds, what's going on in the schools. So whatever our practice is to bring us back to source early in the morning and then all during the day, I think is so important, whether you live in an apartment in Warsaw or London or in a basement somewhere, to have plants and sage or copal or a candle to bring us back to source. So I think that for me is, and if we can do that, then we're going to be okay. You know?
Yeah.
I think it's managing energy, managing my own personal energy, because that's what the commonality of all. One of our great teachers was Angeles Arians, and she was a Basque shaman, and she lived partly in the Pyrenees, part of the year in the Pyrenees in Spain, and then part of the year here in Idaho. In the Basque community. Her father was a shaman, and the shaman were necessary to keep the life of the culture going, to keep their life ways going. And she became a cross-cultural shaman, anthropologist, cross-cultural anthropologist. And one of the things that that she said is that it's all about the energy and being centered within ourselves, and in being able to walk in, a statement they had is walk in beauty. And beauty doesn't mean, what Western, the idea of Western beauty, whatever form, whether in artwork or makeup or whatever. Beauty means to them, it's harmony. And so for me personally, since it's not my actual nature to be particularly calm, to stay in, to constantly reflect back, what am I giving out? What is my energy giving back to the universe? What energy am I contributing? Am I contributing discord, discordant energy that does not flow with the truth of the beauty of nature? Or am I staying centered in my heart? And for me, that's huge on this to stay within what they call personal power. Again, power not being the same in their as the Western worldview. Power is a capacity to remain in harmony. And so that means remain in harmony with the earth, remain in harmony with each other, remain in harmony with nations, with the cosmos, etc. And so for me, it's that being able to, constantly evaluate inside of myself. Am I in harmony now? Am I in balance? In Peruvian tradition, it's called Aina, which is sacred reciprocity, sacred relationship that is balanced.
And what I notice about this one, Cailin, is that maybe like you, when she is painting or carving stone or crafting silver, she is in deep relationship to the materials and the spirit. And that's why, Mattie, if we turn this around, we're not going to, you would see her room filled with paintbrushes and silver working and carving tools, because our living room is an art studio. So
yeah,
it's part of where I observe Mattie staying, being able to be in harmony and to be able to look out into the forest that surrounds her home. It really helps her to plunge deeply into the stone or into the colors to craft, or the beadwork to craft these beautiful, beautiful things.
Well, it's another way.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, it's another way of reflecting back the beauty and saying, we're co-creators, with Creator. Our thoughts, our actions, our feelings all contribute to the creation of the environment. And so, for me, giving back beauty for the beauty that I experience each moment as I wake up, from the moment I wake up in the morning until the moment I close my eyes, being able to create something that is in harmony, that's in balance. And so
I love that.
so
Yeah.
when, so if I'm carving stone, for instance, I'm asking the stone, what do you want to be? And it's not from my idea of what I think. I honestly ask the stone. It's quite surprising. I was carving this stone. I thought this was going to be an eagle because I knew it had bird energy. The stone wanted to fly. But when it came out, it was a little starling. It was this tiny little bird. It was hardly eagle-like at all. And it was perfect because it carried the energy of that stone. That's what the stone wanted to be, not my will being imposed on. So,
Wow, I love it. Yeah, and I didn't realize you were also making art. Yeah, because so many people, they look at art as they need to have some big political statement or do something. I teach art also, and so this is a big, yeah, and I'm an artist too. But it's like, yes, art can be, I love that turnaround you gave it, reflecting the beauty that we see from our lives and surrounding yourself with this nice environment and then creating from that beauty point.
I think it's one of the ways that we show the Creator we have paid attention. We look at this creation, this amazing earth, and say, oh my gosh, how could something so beautiful be created? And then we turn around and try to then create back as a reflection back to Spirit. So this is, my gift back to you.
Yeah, yeah. Love it.
Yeah, she's been crafting these beautiful medicine pipes this last week.
Oh,
so.
Wow. From the stone, or what are materials are you using?
Yeah, from stone. So.
Oh, is that your dog?
Yes. This is our little spirit being that keeps us.
Oh, can we see him or her?
Yeah, Tilda, come here, sweetheart. Come here and say hello. Come here.
Yeah, Tilda wants to get on the video too.
She does.
There's Tilda.
Oh, I love animals.
Watermelon dress.
Oh, how funny. That's hilarious.
That's Tilda.
She's one of our living art forms.
Yes.
She's got probably 40 outfits in her wardrobe.
Oh, wow. Yeah, she's a project.
Yes.
She is.
Well, and in this same spirit, part of David's and my relationship to her is about giving back to the animal world. And so truly realizing that she's sacred and she's holy also. So her needs are important. Who she is, the gift that when the Wolfe people came and started helping humans hunt, then we, it evolved into our current domestic breeds of dog. But the stories are that they were the first animals that came and said, oh, these poor humans need a little help. They don't have the tools, and so we will help them hunt. And so that's a gift, a sacred relationship, like plants, gave us medicines and gave us food, etc. And so having Tilda, having this being in our home, and really caring for her in a way that also brings a sense of we understand how important relationships are. It's about the relationship and the process of relationship, not about the doing or etc. It's the the holiness that's created when one looks at all of it.
And we've had several beautiful dogs from Turkey
Oh,
that I just thought about that were given to us up on the reservation in Canada. They're Anatolian shepherds, and they came to the States in the 50s, but they were gifted to us up in the Blackfoot Reserve. And so we had a mother and her son with us for many, many years. So we have that connection.
yeah. David, tell us some of your experiences with the Blackfoot people and your what was like dancing.
Well, it all started with dreams, which has happened with me a lot. And I had no idea what the dreams were. They were medicine dreams. But I was brought into the ceremony in, in very vivid ways. And so I went to a friend and said, gave him tobacco because I didn't know what else to do. And I said, I've been having these dreams. and he said, dude, you need to take this tobacco to a medicine man. And I said, dude, I don't know any medicine man. It's like they're not exactly advertising. So I'm giving the tobacco to you. And so it ended up that he put me out on my first Humblecha vision quest according to the Lakota people, and invited me to his second Sundance with the Lakota, and I was there. I never saw the dance because I had to leave, but I was so impressed with the quality of spirit that was around this dance. And then I started having more dreams. And short story is that I got a telephone call one night. I was getting ready to dance with my friend down in California with the Lakota. And I got this call on Monday night from some guy that I didn't even know. And he says, I understand you're getting ready to Sundance. And maybe 3 people knew about it. So I have no idea how he found out about it. And I said, yes. And he said, well, there's this Blackfoot elder that's ready to help you out if you want help. And I said, perfect. I said, because all I've been taught to do was just sweat as much as I can, and pray. And so he said, this is Monday night, right? It's the middle of, I was teaching at the college. And he said, he'll be down Wednesday in 2 days. From Canada. I go, great. He said, do you know where we can get materials to build a sweat lodge? I said, yeah. He said, the stones, the wood. I said, yeah. Do you have land where we can do this? I said, yeah, Mattie and I have land, ceremonial land out on an island northwest Seattle. And so that's how it started. And we had a big 24-foot TV. We got all the materials ready. And on that Wednesday, this big Blackfoot guy, chief of a traditional Blackfoot elder, he was a young elder, he was in his 40s at the time. He's older now. He's in his late 60s now, so he's a real elder now. And so he took us through a 4-day food and water fast and Sundance preparation time. And after we finished, his words to us were, I didn't think I'd ever see you again. Because it was pretty demanding, 5 lodges in 4 days and no food and no water. And so we did 2 more fasts to get ready. And then that next summer, I danced my first dance with other people. It was his first dance in Chief. And I've been dancing. That was in the summer of 1998. And I've been dancing with him and with other women who come up there. And it's been like entering into the most sublime sacred relationship, Cailin, that I've ever experienced. And I have to, with the tree of life, because we're tied to the tree, with ropes and pins through the men are to the tree for 4 days and 4 nights. And so the connection is so strong and yet so beautiful, and I've experienced things that are way past my ordinary understanding. And there are more stories to be told on another occasion, but one of them was I was really suffering my second year, so I'll tell it in a short way, that I was really suffering and not knowing if I can make it because the sun was really hot that year. And so I went with my spirit to the tree and I said to the tree, I need help. And all of a sudden, these dear spirits showed up and they said, little brother, what are you doing dancing out in the sun like you're doing? We don't move during the day, we rest during the day. So if you'll come with us to where we're resting in the shade of the trees, we'll help you. And so I did. I let my spirit go with them, and I checked in to the arbor every once in a while to make sure I was still there in the arbor with the tree. My body was still there. And so I went with them in my spirit, and they took care of me during the hot heat of the day, for that day, and the third day, and the fourth day. And they got me through it because I rested with them in the shade of their spirit's tree, their whole dear family. And as I finished, I said, what do I need to do to give you thanks? And they told me what I needed to do. And I won't go into that because it's another long story, but the substance of it was that I needed to visit a lake high up in the mountains in the Olympic Peninsula. And I went with Mattie, a friend from England, and we had to go. It took us 4 or 5 hours to make the trek all the way up to this lake. I'd been there before, but what I didn't know is that the lake is called Deer Lake. And so we made our offerings at the side of this lake. The lake, it was all shrouded over with mist, and as we made our offerings, which the dear people said I needed to do at the side of the lake, as soon as we lit the candles and made the offerings, this wind came through from the north to the south of the lake where we were and blew all the mist away, and everything became bright and beautiful. And so we knew that our offerings had been accepted. So that's one really short example of this. I need this reciprocity of giving back, making offerings back to these dear people. And so every year I dance, I make offerings to them because every year, including this year, they're part of my dance, as are the elk people and the buffalo people, because they've also helped me to get through the dance, because on our own, we would never make it. It's too much. It's too much to be out in the sun without food and water for 4 days, without help from the spirits, from the ancestor spirits. So,
Cailin, I think this.
Thank you for that.
I'm getting some more.
Illustrates a really important aspect that's fundamental to this way of being, this worldview, and it's the sharing of energy. And in Western and modern Western worldview, we're accustomed to taking energy. We go out and we take energy from food, we take energy from each other, etc. And the first peoples, the earth people, knew that it needed to be a giving away. When white Europeans came to Turtle Island, to what is now the United States, there were no prisons. There was no There was no such thing as taking someone and locking them up. Because it was about sacred relationships. So, for instance, the people in the East had what they called a peace village, and so if you broke a rule of relationship, if you stole from someone or something like that, they don't have this concept of good, bad, right, and wrong. They would say, "Oh, you've forgotten how to be human. We then therefore need to take you back and teach you how to be human again." And so they would take them to the peace village, and the elders would love them and reteach them the stories as if they were a little child, etc. Now, there are some people who are just, scoundrels and mean
and stubborn.
Yes, and stubborn. And if they continued then to break the laws of human relationship, then what they would do is to be banished from the community. And that was probably meant to be, that was probably would mean death for them, because you would need your community to survive in that kind of environment. And it's just such a different way of looking, rather than good, bad, right, wrong, praise or punishment. It's how do we return back into sacred relationship? How do we look at what we give? And for them, we in modern world, we amass esteem in society by what we have accrued to ourselves: money, cars, power, land, houses, whatever. But in their worldview, most indigenous worldview, it's what we can give away. And so that's where your sense of worth in the community is, what can you share, what can you give away. So how they look upon it is that we give energy to people rather than try to take energy from them. And that was a concept I didn't understand. It's like because I kept giving energy to people in a way that were then taking, and I would be depleted because I wasn't getting anything back.
Yeah, and also about the giveaways at the end of every ceremony, can you tell the story about that concept too, the physical gifting giveaway?
Okay, I'll add that in here. And so what I learned is that you give to their higher self, you give to what is sacred in them. And so an expression of that is in many Native American traditions is what's called the giveaway. And in the giveaway, it is an expression of that I'm honoring. It's an expression of honoring you so much that I give to you my best, not what I can do without, but what is really the best of me, and knowing that it will be returned back. And so what?
Well, so a quick story. So one of the things that is bad manners to do, but I did, there's a Shoshone elder that was traveling with us one time, and he had this beautiful porcupine quill bracelet on his wrist that had been dyed and done in the old way. It was probably $500 or $600 value. And I made the mistake of saying, "Oh, it is so beautiful."
I love that.
Yeah, yeah.
And he went like this. He took it off his wrist and he gave it to me. And I started to say, no. And he said, and that's happened to me in the reverse when I've realized, and it happened with another Shoshone medicine guy, that I had this beautiful turquoise bracelet that was old style that I loved. It was very valuable, very precious to me. And he had married Mattie and me at one time in our life, and he had been a real healer for us in many ways. And so I just knew that bracelet needed to go to him. And so I gave it to him just to thank him. And when I saw the bracelet on him, it was much more beautiful than it had ever been on me. You know, and so it was an example of, you know, and they happen to be bracelet, but precious things be transferred.
So it's just, you know, that idea that that life isn't about taking, life is about giving. You know, life is that just as the earth so abundantly gives to us, and for us to live in community take without without realizing that there's a responsibility to give back is so important.
Well, it's a response. When we were in the Amazon, you know, we were taught it's about feeding the spirit of the plants or the trees or the animals. And our teacher, Don Augustine Rivas Vasquez, down in upriver in the Amazon, said, you know, your people are always coming down here to extract what they think are curative properties from our plants. And there are some physical properties that are curative and it won't work, but what you forget is that the real curative properties are in your relationship with the spirit of that plant. And you need to develop a relationship with the plant to ask the plant for its help in what it is you're doing. It's not just plopping something in your mouth or eating something, you know, it's a relationship with that plant, whatever the plant is. Ayahuasca, San Pedro, you know, whatever the plant is. And that was a big
and the
teaching.
offerings.
And making offerings, yeah, just like we wouldn't come into your home, Cailin, and grab a painting off the wall and take it. We would bring gift to say we honor you and we respect you and we're bringing something to you that's precious. And let it be that, you know, because what's important is to have good relationship with you or anybody else. You know, the gas station attendant, the gardener, whoever it is, the homeless person on the street, to have good relationship with them because we're all part of that soup. You know, we're all in the soup together, as some have said.
That's beautiful. Thank you for that. These are wonderful teachings and stories. What kind of advice would you give to anybody who's starting out? You know, and do they need an indigenous elder or native teacher to get on this path?
Yeah, that's a little turtle. I don't know if you can see it.
Hold it up a little. Oh yes, there.
Yeah, it's a little turtle. I wear it because my advice to myself or to anybody on this path is to don't be in a hurry. You know,
Go slow.
Go slow, because if you're in a hurry, you're just going to bump your head or fall on your face.
Wow,
so
right.
Have the patience to wait until the mud settles and the water is clear, until the right action arises all by itself. Let the teacher send your prayers out like an arrow just one time, and then wait for spirit to bring to you the teachers or the teachings that you need. So I jumped in there because that's what I do sometimes. But that's what I would say, really.
And you know, and there are things you can do while you're waiting. One of the things that you can do is to continue to realize that you can only receive to the amount that you're open to receiving. And so it's continuing to open yourself. We as humans, when we are frightened or have been hurt, when our tendency is to close down. And so we close off our heart as children in a mistaken idea that will make us safe. But in truth, that it will protect us. But in truth, in our vulnerability is our strength. So opening our heart up wider is where we have the most incredible strength. And I learned this from the old Celtic warriors from Ireland and Scotland. You know, they fought naked, and they wore paint, but they didn't have any kind of armor. And they stood, and the message they were giving to the Romans, who were all armored up, was, we are so strong that we don't need armor to be warriors, that in and of ourselves. So they were, and that teaching came to me. So it's in my vulnerability is my strength, in my open-heartedness. So learning to see life as it actually is, seeing the world as it actually is.
The women and the men together fought that way.
So experiencing, opening up to the world and experiencing it as it really is, rather than how culture has taught us. So that means having primary experiences in nature. If that simply means, we live in a huge city, finding a park, sitting out, making it a sacred practice to go out and make offerings in the park. When Grandfather Misha, who was another Siberian shaman that came over to the West Coast, one of the things he said is, you people have forgotten how to feed your trees. Your trees are hungry. And so that meant making offerings to the trees to thank them for the air that they give us, the wood that they give us to light our fires, the shade and the fruit that they give us to eat. But so that's called feeding the trees, or in other words, making offerings. So those are things that we can do.
Can I just interject a question? Is that the best way, you think, for people to access spirit guides or helping spirits, by starting with offerings like that, for example?
Yes, absolutely. And so then what happens is they watch, these spirits watch, and when they see that your heart is really receptive, is really open to a wider perception of how the world is, then they show up. They come to us. They will come unbidden. We do have spirit guides and spirit helpers that will show up even if we don't make ourselves. Sometimes when we really, really need it. I was delivering my child, and I was a very young woman, and all of a sudden in this moment, I felt this mother lioness enter into my body. It was never had an experience like that. But all of a sudden, this lioness entered my body, and I knew that I would die protecting my child. My whole being was changed. And I later then had dreams of mountain lions, and that's been a spirit guide and helper that of mine, forever, and came into me at a time that I really needed it, because I was at this, I don't think I can do this place in the birthing process. And this lioness came in and said, "Oh yes, you can. You can do this. You just hold in there." So my experience has been is when we prepare ourselves mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually to receive, by first giving back to the energy, being willing to wait forever if it takes it. It's not like, okay, I've gone out and made offerings for a month now. Where is my spirit guide? It's that willingness to say, this is a sacred duty that I perform and give to you, simply because that's it, for its purpose, not to get anything, but to give. And once we cross over from that wanting to get something or grab something from it, then that is when they will come.
Yeah, and we can, make an offering, and we go out on a vision quest, a solitary experience without food, without water, and we can also journey shamanically, with drums or rattles, or do ecstatic dance. But it's so important, as Mattie said, before we do any of those activities, to make an offering, to make a prayer, and to ask in a good way, because there are many ways to make contact.
Right. We have some other episodes that go deeply into some offerings and things that people can make, but would you have any ways that, you know, beginning or what you do, you know, what are some offerings that people could do if they don't know?
Well, in this tradition, it's more about the intention than the actual offering. So an offering can be anything. An offering could be a bit of food, an offering, and you know, where you, with ceremonial intention, go out in reverence, preparing yourself, and you know, lay it out on the ground and say, I offer this back to you for all the gifts that you are giving to me. So it can really be anything. Tobacco in many Native American cultures is an offering because it's a plant that helped humans. Early on, it was a plant helper. In the Southwest, corn was another plant helper. So offerings of cornmeal or tobacco are traditional in the Turtle Islands native cultures. Also smudge is a way. The burning of pukal or the burning of sage is making an offering. It's releasing that sweet smelling spirit back to the earth. So there are all kinds of ways. The key is your heart. You know, what is in your heart? So, and I would honestly say the best offering is the offering that comes from you, not trying to imitate or follow anything that you've seen necessarily, but to take it into heart and say, what does my heart want to get? What does my heart want to?
Right, and you can make your own ways intuitively. What feels right for, yeah.
Taking clean water to the ocean and offering water back to the ocean is also a beautiful thing to do. Or to remember.
Oh, nice.
And to say thank you. I'm drinking this because of you. And I want to connect up with the water spirits, maybe with my emotions. So I would like you to help teach me about my emotional body. So I make you this offering to make that request. And that's all that needs to be done. And then obviously the lessons. You know, when somebody cuts in front of you in a car or tells you on the phone that you're whatever, you know, so then the lessons start coming. So it's, you know, many teachers say you better be careful what you're asking for. So years ago, Mattie was asking to be married to a hippie professor, and so that came to pass.
But that was when I was in my 20s, not in my 50s and 60s.
Yeah, she said, but I didn't expect him to be 60 years old. I said, sweetie, you've got to be more precise in your prayers. You got to be much more precise with your prayers, because he showed up, but he didn't show up like you thought, you know. So you got to pray more precisely.
So an added point of this, I mean, even showering can be an offer. And in having the water and being aware, placing pure attention on the water, not just using it to clean up, but really realize what a gift it is, and to speak those words in your heart.
And to say thank you for cleaning me today. So every day when we shower, we do that. We just thank the water that we have. Because at the Sundance, it's not the food calling, it's the water that's most precious. Because your body dries up and you're desperate for water, you know. So it's really the water is such a gift to us.
Can you talk about why the going without the food and water for these ceremonial purposes, including Vision Quest, is such an important piece of it?
Well, we can both speak to that, but it moves us out of our ordinary reality and our dependency on our food and water. So we have to depend on spirit. Like I said in the story that I shared, I wasn't going to make it. I just wasn't going to make it if I didn't ask for help. So I think it's, you know, and they're teaching us is that that's our giveaway when we give up water, or food. That's our giveaway. That's our gift back. We give that up so that we can have more a closer relationship to spirit. I mean, the dervishes, you know, when you're part of the world, they do it in their way. That they give up their way of seeing the world to see the world in another way. So there are many ways, but that's part of it. And that's part of why we give flesh, because it's what we have and what we can give. Give our flesh either through a flesh offering or through being pierced the women or the men at the hands. We give our flesh so that, they say, so that people will, that we give our blood, we shed our blood in that way, not in some barbaric ritual, but because we care for our brothers and sisters, and we give that up so that we can be more of a service to them. The rest of the year, the 361 other days of the year, we do this so that we can be present every day.
And it is really giving up what is most precious. Without water and food, we don't live. And so that's precious to life. And it's saying, I do this with intention. I on purpose give this up in order to give back what is most dear and precious to me. And it's usually, it's for the people, you know, it's for, it's, and part of this, yes, we ask for things for ourselves. We need healing at times, etc. And we must always bear in mind the larger community, the community of all humans, the community of all sentience on this earth. And so we can give those gifts.
Oh, and I was just thinking about money.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yes, let's talk about money.
Well, because in ceremony, there's always been a gifting for ceremony. And a lot of people are saying, oh, you shouldn't charge for whatever. And no, it's not grabbing somebody's money or manipulating them for money so that you can steal it from them. No, it's like we're going to a body worker later today, and we love to gift her because of the gifts that she, but that's the way we hold it. We hold it as a gifting, that we're helping her life out. And because she gives us such gifts. I mean, she's healed both of us.
You know, it's that idea that, you know, you'll often hear in shamanic circles that you don't ever pay for ceremony, etc. And that just was not the truth. The shamans of old were paid in blankets and horses and in food. No, it wasn't paper, but it was. But it was not. It's not the worldview of payment for. It's not. This is something that has a commodity, that has a value, and then you match that value with money. It's the honoring them for the gift that they are giving you. It's a subtle but completely different worldview. And they, a lot of people say, oh no, well, you just take tobacco. That's all you do. Well, I'm telling you, those old people can't eat tobacco. And it's against the law for them to sell the tobacco. So they need to be able to eat too. So the kind of is silliness. I mean, really, the elders that I've known, it's just say, oh, it's just silliness. And that really is a sort of a white worldview about, it's you honor people. And so David was really, really, really both emotionally, spiritually, and physically ill one time. And we went to an elder here in the Northwest. And I knew to take her many gifts. She just said, when I said, he's very sick, can you help us? And she said, yes. She didn't say, that'll be $25 or that'll be $3,000 or whatever. She said, yes, I can. And she knew that the measure of healing that David would receive was based on the measure of what we gave.
The generosity.
The generosity of what we gave. And, you know, I knew, so I had amassed at that time buttons. Mother of pearl buttons are very important to the Northwest artwork. They cover their blankets in patterns of buttons. And I had through the years amassed this huge sack of buttons. I mean, thousands of buttons.
Wow.
And I was going to do something spectacular with these buttons, yet I knew that that was a perfect gift to bring to her. I mean, you know, because,
Wow.
and she opened up the sack, this huge sack of buttons, and she opened it up and she said, oh, now I can make all my nieces and nephews and grandchildren their first button blanket. And she said, how did you know I needed these buttons? And
Oh my God.
that's what she wanted, or, you know, and she said, and I have so many that I have plenty to share. And so that gift of an overabundance of you know, the ability to not only make every gift that she could possibly make and be able to share it.
And we took many things because I needed a big healing.
Yeah.
And she's still a dear friend. This was almost 18 years ago. She's become a dear friend.
Wow.
We've
Wow.
always been generous with her.
So what, Cailin, I want to make sure that that I tell this quick story.
Okay.
And it's about, it's in line with how does one begin this path, or what happens. And usually we get a sort of an inner calling, an inner knowing that we're missing something or we need something. It may be a tiny little seed. And then we get pulled towards something that seems to have heart and meaning for us. And that brings up a issue that people call cultural appropriation. And there is a very rigid stance that if you weren't born in that culture, you shouldn't be practicing its cultural ways. And my story was when I was working with some Native women, and they were going to share some things with me, very precious and very sacred and secret, only women's medicine. And I said, oh no, I can't accept this. I'm not Native American. And this old woman looked up at me and she said, oh, are you a dog? I said, no, I'm not a dog. And she said, oh, are you a dragon? I said, no. You know, she said, are you a snake? And snakes are very, very sacred to these people. And I was so confused. And I said, no. And she said, well, then what are you? And I said, I'm a human being. And she said, exactly. The gifts of the Spirit are for the people. Are you not a people? And so that was my first realization. As my relationship with her continued, and I said something, I asked her one day, why am I so drawn to this? Because it's not of my culture. It's not of my heritage. And she said, were you born on this land? And I said, yes. And she said, then the same spirits that called us and taught us are the spirits that are calling you and teaching you. So they see this as, they know the land, the place, the spirit of place has its own specific way of working and being. And if you tune into that spirit, then it will call to you or won't call to you. No, one or the other, but in tuning into that deep sacred place, then the same spirits that taught their people are the spirits that were calling to me. And that's how they saw it.
Wow.
There wasn't a thing about cultural appropriation or stealing there. Now, I don't practice specific people's rituals. When I pour a sweat lodge, for instance, I pour a multicultural lodge, one that takes the properties and gifts that I've been given from many people. And so what I liken it to is that I pour the spirit of that lodge. I pour the spirit of those 4 directions, or the spirit of the herbs that I've been given the right to use in the lodge. And I don't, well, I just want to put it, I want to say it that way.
Well, thank you for adding the appropriation piece, and that it is possible. We're all one human species.
Family. Yeah, we
Family.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, then I want to add a piece, because you've been a traveler, so I'm saying this to all the travelers, that
Okay,
whenever
yes.
you go anywhere to Ireland or to another city, it's really important for you to take time to introduce yourself to the spirits of that place and to make offerings to the 4 directions. Because when I first came from the US and we started doing work in Europe and in Poland or in England and made those offerings, the spirits that showed up when I did that were not the same spirits. They may be called a bear spirit or a deer spirit, but the energy was totally different. So I would just remind people as we travel more and more to Egypt, to Peru, wherever, that we say, I'm a visitor here. I'm coming here for the first time, and I want to know you. I want relationship with you. So I'm offering this tobacco, these flowers, whatever, and then to wait and see who shows up, because they will show up. But the spirits in Poland are not the same spirits in Scotland. They're not.
Right.
They're not.
And they mess with me if I don't do that right away.
Exactly.
Exactly. But it's just appropriate honoring. And by the way,
it's bad manners.
Yeah, to not.
Right.
And also another important aspect is that when we have been someplace in a ceremony or a meeting, or even a workshop or a teaching, that afterwards when we leave and go to someplace else, that we call our soul back. We humans kind of forget and leave pieces of when we've had a really powerful soulful experience.
Yeah.
And we leave that piece there. We don't stop and say, okay, so I need to take you back with me. I need to pull you back to me, so that when I leave, I leave whole, W-H-O-L-E, I leave wholehearted. And so, for instance, at the Sundance, the Sundance leaders will teach that you go around to all the places that you visited on the Sundance grounds and call back your spirit to the, and they say, we don't want all your spirits just kind of left hanging around waiting for you. You take your spirits back home with you.
So, and if people have had trauma in their life, in a home, and they're a little girl or a little boy, it's really important when they're ready to go back to that home, that neighborhood, or that school, wherever the trauma happened, offer some tobacco, a flower, something to say, I want to call my spirit back, because I want to. It's another form of soul retrieval, but to literally go back to that place, not just in our mind. I mean, we can do it in our mind, but as I've done that to places where I've had trauma, the trauma's gone away, Cailin.
Wow.
And it's something that we're not taught in our culture, to go back to those places and to make it gifty and call our spirits back, so that we don't leave that traumatized little girl or little boy there.
Yeah, that's interesting. You just went right into what I was going to ask you, because, what are some of the native practices or that are closely aligned with shamanism for when you leave a part of yourself accidentally or unknown or through trauma? How do you do that? Have you had to do that through your lives?
Exactly. Well, one of the ways to do it as for yourself is what David was talking about, is with intention, with sacred, pure intention, to go back and say, I need to call this back to me. I need to call back the piece of me that I left because I thought that was either taken from me or that I left because I didn't know how to maintain my sacred center, my sacred energy. And of course, there are people who can go do those retrievals for you because they are practiced in that realm. They have the experience of traveling safely in that realm and bringing back to you, which I'm sure you know is called soul retrieval, and there are people that practice that.
Yeah. Have you done that in your lives also, each of you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. When David and I first got together, one of the first things that we did was travel back to our childhood home places. Other people, of course, lived in those homes, but we traveled back to the neighborhood and introduced each other to this is where my environment that I grew up in, and then made offerings to call back spirits so that we would be whole people coming together, two whole people coming together rather than people that had little pieces of themselves left out.
Nice idea. Yeah, when you're newly together.
Because otherwise our energy is fragmented and we wonder what's wrong. And that's part of what's wrong, is we haven't done our forgiveness work or whatever we need to do to call our spirits back. Yeah, so it's an ongoing process. We still do it. And,
Yeah, right.
We do it differently with arousal.
Well, you guys, thank you. We've really gone over time, but I love your stories. I didn't want to stop. I just said, too good. We're going to keep going. But is there anything in closing that you'd like to finish with? Anything that feels right?
The thing I'd like to close with is a word of gratitude to you for your courage, for your heart in being willing to risk to provide teachings to people in this modern medium, in this modern way of talking and sharing, so that those who live in areas that don't have direct access can through this also find a way that their spirit is fed, their own spirit is fed. And so I want to give gratitude to you for that courage, that place of heart that allows you to step out in this way and to make your offerings to the end.
Thank you. I'm so honored to have you both on the show. It's a real pleasure.
Well, we've loved it too, and I hope this isn't the last of our visiting together, however we do it,
Okay.
Whether it goes out to anybody or whether we just chat. So
thank you, David and Mattie.
thank you, Cailin.